So one of the interesting topics in programming is dealing with exceptions, right? Exceptions, you might have heard this if you've done any type of programming. It's really common, and what it means is that when something wrong happens in the program or an error occurs, then the program usually stops, right? Or the execution stops if something goes wrong, like for example parsing an integer incorrectly, or doing some type of thing that that the language even wouldn't accept, right? So dealing with errors could also be like, for example, if the user inputs an invalid value, for example, and you want to actually not proceed with the program. If that happens, then you would usually throw an error, right? So to understand this further, let's look at how we can deal with exceptions. So first and foremost, this requires a good understanding of what things can throw exceptions. So one simple thing that happens is that if you haven't defined a certain variable and you try to print it out, let's just say print hello. Hello is not defined, right? We even see that it says it's not defined. If I run this, we get an exception. So we get a name error. It says that this is not really correct. And if I say print hello world, and which is a valid statement in Python, it will stop the execution, right? So it won't even proceed to the second statement. Let's run this. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so you see it doesn't even print out anything, right? So it doesn't continue to the second statement even. So this means that we need to do something. If something goes wrong, we need to actually try to catch this. This is what we call a try catch in many programming languages. So it's similar in Python. So you would say you need to try, if you know that something might not work out, then you would wrap it in a try catch, and then you would say that the exception, like in the case of an exception, you would say something went wrong. Okay, I'll just print that something went wrong. So let's see. So now at least the program should not crash. Let's see. So now we see it just printed out something went wrong. So it's jumped out of this, and let's print something here. For example, yay, we printed something out, just to prove the point that it does not continue to the next line. This is a really important thing to understand in programming. So we see that the only thing that was printed out was something went wrong. So basically it tried to execute this statement, it failed, and then it didn't continue. So it stops the execution. That's one of the most important properties of an exception, is that it stops the execution. And if there's a try catch, it will jump into the catch or the except block here. So it will continue from here, right, and print this out. Usually we don't want to just have a generic exception like this, right? We would like this to kind of tell what type of error it is. So in this case, it's a name error. We know this. So if I print this out, this is just for convenience, because it's good to know what error it is. And if some other function is calling this code, for example, then it's good to actually send an understandable error type. And you could also say that, let's say if something else went wrong, that wasn't the name error, something else went wrong. So to prove this, let me just say, try to print out 1 plus 1 like this, right? Which is invalid in Python, so it's not possible to concatenate an integer with a string. So now I hope it will try to run this but fail, and it will crash, it will stop the execution, and it will not go into here because it's not a name error, right? It doesn't have to do with something not being found, like a variable not being found, but it has to do with with a type. So I would say it's a type error, but let's see. So now we see something else went wrong. And if I remove this and I print this out, let's see, let me try to print this out at the top, right? Outside of the try block. Then it should be a type error, I think. Yeah, so it's a type error. So so then you could say that this is a type error. So, and you could say something, here you could say, for example, for the name error, you could say the variable is missing, it's not defined. And here you could say, for example, the type is not correct, or something like this. This is just an example. It's not the best error message, and it's not actually describing the problem, but you would usually have a nice message, or kind of deal with it in some way, right? You can deal with errors in many ways. And of course, there is the finally block as well, where you can say print end of program. So it will always print this, right? No matter where the execution goes, no matter the path of the execution, it will always end up here. So let's run this. So it says the type is not correct because this was the problem, and it says print end of program. If I say print name, for example, and we know that this is now a name error, then what do you think? Will it jump here or will it jump there? Because we have two problems, right? We have this and we have this. So let's run this, and we see that it actually goes to the variable is not defined, which is on this line. And the reason is, as I said before, that we know in programming that it follows a sequence, right? So the compiler will look at this line first and then say, okay, this is wrong, it will crash, and then it will, since it's a name error, it will print this out, and it will not proceed executing anything else in this block. So it will end up here, and then it will run the finally block, right? And this is good to know that you have the finally spell. Lastly, I would like to talk about actually throwing errors. So this is another thing that sometimes we want to actually stop the execution. So we want to not proceed in the program if we got like an invalid input. So let's say I'll say user input variable, and I'll say I'll get some input, type your age, okay, for example, and I will check if try, I'll say age, and I will try to parse this into an integer, right? So I will say int user input, right? And then I will say if the age is less than 18, I will say raise exception, sorry, you have to be at least 18 years old. And if there is an exception, I'll just say exception and print something went wrong. Okay, so let's run this and see what happens. I'll clear the terminal. I'll run it again. I'll say type my age, so I'll say 15. Something went wrong, right? This is interesting. Why was this not possible? Let me, so the int here 15, so let me type my age. So yeah, so what happened now was that when I ran it with 15, this actually, so this is an interesting problem now. So let's see. So if I write 15, actually what I should do, I should actually, so what I should do is actually, as I say, I should print out the actual error, right? As I say, I should say exception, something like that, and I should print out the exception so we understand. So let's run this now. So I'll type my age. I will say 15, for example, which is less than 18. So it will say, okay, 15 is less than 18. It will raise the exception, and then it will jump inside here, right, and print it out. So that's just what will happen. So you see, sorry, you have to be at least 18 years old. So this is how we would raise an exception. We could also say, for example, if there is a type error, then we would say print you have to provide an integer, right? Let's see. Okay, the reason why this code is unreachable is that it is actually it's actually not, since this is a generic exception, it will never get to this part. So it just has to be, I think, a value error, I guess. Then it would work, hopefully. I'm not sure if this is a value error, but I would say that we should raise the value error, right? Since it's not really the value that we expect in the program. So let's see if I run. Let's just try the first scenario. I'll provide 15. It still says you have to be 18. And let's run this again. I should clear the terminal. Let's run this again. And I'll say, okay, hello. And then it says invalid literal. Since this is a value error, yeah, I guess that this is the same. I'll say value error here. So let's see what happens if I say test. It's still a value error, right? So that's probably the problem here. But yeah, but you see the point here is that it's interesting that it doesn't fail on this line though. That's quite interesting. Or it does fail here, but it actually returns a value error, not a type error. That's interesting. So I guess that if this fails, then it will. Let me try to see print parse. Yeah, so it fails here, and it's a value error, and therefore it runs in, goes in here. So this is kind of how you would throw errors in Python, and yeah, thanks for watching.